Deep within the human heart, there lies a dangerous seed. It is not hatred, it is not fear, it is vanity, that silent, creeping obsession with how we are seen. Rather than who we are, we all want to shine. But have you ever asked yourself, what is the price of that admiration? How much of your soul are you willing to trade for a moment of glory? Welcome to a story not of monsters under the bed, but of the monster in the mirror. This is the tale of a girl, a pair of shoes, and a dance that would not stop. This is The Red Shoes. Our story begins in a world stripped of color. In a gray, freezing village lived a girl named Karen. She was beautiful, but she was terribly poor. In summer, she walked barefoot on sharp stones. In winter, she wore heavy wooden clogs that chafed her ankles until they bled. Karen had a dream, not of warmth, but of beauty. One day, the village shoemaker stitched together scraps of rough red cloth. They were clumsy and ugly, but to Karen, they were a masterpiece. On the very day her mother was buried, Karen wore those red shoes behind the humble coffin, a splash of vibrant sin in a sea of black mourning. It was then that a luxurious carriage stopped. An old wealthy lady took pity on the shivering orphan and took her in. Karen's life changed instantly. She was given soft beds and warm clothes. But the old lady, finding the red shoes lowly, threw them into the fire. Karen watched them burn. She watched the only thing she had ever loved turn to ash. In that moment, a hunger awoke in her heart, a hunger that nothing could satisfy. Years passed. Karen grew into a breathtaking young woman. But the mirror became her closest friend. She was beautiful, and she knew it. When the time came for her confirmation, a sacred rite of passage, she needed new shoes. The old lady, whose eyes were dim with age, took Karen to the finest shop in the city. And there, resting in a glass case like a forbidden fruit, were the shoes. They were not black. They were not sensible. They were red. A deep, glossy patent leather that seemed to pulse with an inner light. The red called to her. It promised that if she wore them, everyone would look. Everyone would know she was special. With a sly smile, Karen deceived the near-blind old lady, letting her buy the inappropriate shoes. The Sunday of the confirmation arrived. The church was solemn, filled with pious faces. As Karen walked down the aisle, the sound was different. Click, clack, every step was a declaration. She felt the eyes of the congregation on her feet. She felt the scandal, and she loved it. When she knelt at the altar, she did not think of God. She looked down at the shiny red leather, smiling at her own reflection. She had chosen vanity over faith, but vanity is a debt, and the collector was coming. The following Sunday, as they approached the church, a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was an old soldier, twisted and strange, with a beard that hung to his waist. He didn't look at Karen's face. He looked straight at her feet. He bowed low, a mocking grin on his scarred face. "What beautiful dancing shoes," he rasped. "Mind you keep them on when you dance." He reached out and tapped the soles. Tap, tap. A cold jolt ran down Karen's spine. She hurried away, but the spell was cast. During the service, her feet twitched. The leather felt hot, alive. A few days later, a grand ball was announced, but the old lady had fallen desperately ill. She lay in bed, breathing shallowly, needing care. Karen stood in her room, the invitation in one hand, looking at the dying woman who had saved her. Then she looked at the red shoes. "Just one dance," she whispered. "I will be back soon." She laced up the shoes. They tightened around her ankles like a lover's embrace. She left her duty. She ran to the ball. The music was intoxicating. Karen stepped onto the floor, and the world blurred. She was the star. She began to dance, but then the music changed. Karen tried to turn right, but the shoes pulled her left. She tried to stop, but the shoes kicked higher. Panic flared. She grabbed a chair, but the shoes dragged her, and the chair, across the floor. The guests gasped in horror. This was not a dance. It was a struggle. She clawed at the laces, trying to rip them off, but they were fused to her skin. The shoes danced her out of the ballroom, down the stairs, and into the dark, cold night. Click, clack, click, clack. Faster and faster. They danced her into the terrifying forest. The trees loomed like judging giants. Briars tore her fine dress to rags. Stones cut her skin, but the shoes did not stop. Dance, they seemed to whisper. You wanted to be seen? Then dance. Days turned into nights. Karen danced through storms that soaked her to the bone. She was exhausted, starving, weeping. She danced into the churchyard, hoping for rest among the dead, but an angel with a sword of fire blocked her path. You shall dance, the angel commanded. You shall dance until you are pale and cold. You shall knock on the doors of vain children, so they hear you and fear you. Karen screamed for mercy, but the shoes carried her away. She danced past her own home. The windows were dark. She heard a funeral hymn. The old lady was dead. Karen had missed the chance to say goodbye. The weight of her guilt was heavier than the shoes on her feet. She was alone, completely alone with her sin. Her body was breaking. She knew she could not go on. There was only one way out. She danced her way deep into the woods, to a lonely hut where the executioner lived. He stood by the door, his axe resting against a stump. A giant of a man, silent and grim. Karen danced toward him, tears streaming down her face. Do not chop off my head, she cried, for then I cannot repent. But chop off my feet with the red shoes. It was a horrific request, but it was the only way to sever the bond. The executioner nodded. He understood the language of penance. Karen placed her feet on the wooden block. She closed her eyes. She did not think of beauty. She thought only of freedom. The axe fell. There was a flash of white light. The red shoes, still containing the severed feet, danced away into the thicket, their red glow fading into the darkness, never to return. Karen fell to the earth, crippled, broken. But the silence was beautiful. The rhythm was gone. She crawled to the parsonage, the home of the village pastor. She was no longer the proud beauty. She became a humble servant. She worked hard, sitting in the corner, quiet and grateful. She learned that true beauty is not in what you wear, but in what you give. Time passed. Karen's heart began to heal. One Sunday morning, the sun broke through the clouds with otherworldly brilliance. Karen sat in her small room, her Bible in her lap, listening to the church organ in the distance. She closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. She looked up, and the walls of her room seemed to dissolve. The sunlight became a golden path stretching into the infinite sky. And there, in the light, was forgiveness. Karen stood up. She did not need her crutches. She did not feel pain. Her heart burst with a joy so pure it lifted her from the ground. Her soul traveled along that sunbeam, up and away from the sorrow of the world, up to a place where no one looks at your shoes, but only at the light within your spirit. The story of Karen ends here, but the question remains. We all have our own red shoes. We all have that thing we chase, that shiny, hollow promise of vanity. Look down at your feet. Look into your heart. Are you walking your own path? Or are you dancing to a tune that will never let you rest? Be careful what you wish for once the dance begins, it is very, very hard to stop.